know what scrutineering really is, and then provide some tips for preparation, actually executing, going through scrutineering, as well as a breakdown of every station that you have and what to expect at them. So, slide please. And then if you could go ahead and play that. So this is just a video that we took last year that, for those of you who aren't really sure of what the setup will look like, we are all in the NASCAR pit garages, so you feel like a real race team in these garages. And it doesn't look like, there we go. So you can see we're all set up. Each team has their own bay. And we can just skip it. And that was what I wanted to show for the most part. Each team has their own bay. And yeah, it gives you a good enough sample. Each team has their own bay, and you have 2 to 3 days to get roughly, I looked through the scrutineering document last night, over 160 different things that have to be checked and signed off on your car so that you're good to race. And it's broken up into multiple different stations, and it requires a lot of additional prior preparation. So going into that, slide please. So one of the biggest tips, which has already been discussed, is have your car finished by the time you get to the race. That depends on a lot of other factors, I know, but scrutineering is something that's so technically intense that if you encounter problems that you don't know about going into it, it sets you back. And if you already have other problems that you also find yourself having to work on, then you're even further behind. And while we love having every single team here, we want everyone to succeed, but there are times when, if it comes down to that deadline, we can't let a car race if it's not safe enough. And it is my least favorite part of this, because I've been through what these teams, what you all have gone through or are going to go through. And for someone to tell me that that race is not going to be something that I'm going to be a part of, it would be absolutely devastating. So I don't want anyone to face that. So please take scrutineering as seriously as you can and prepare beforehand. And that means having all of your documentation ready so that you can go through the stations quickly. That means having additional scraps of metal to prove that your crush zone is adequate or that your roll bar is adequate. Look through those rules ahead of time. Make sure that your car meets all of those things. We have old scrutineering documents that are on the website. Go through that. Give yourself the prior knowledge and that early heads up by looking at every single box that needs to be checked off and make sure, hey, can my car pass this? Can my car pass that? Because if it can't on that document, it's almost a guarantee that it won't when it gets here. And William actually mentioned earlier that waivers are due May 1st of this year. So if you think that there's something that needs to be changed and you might not have the ability to actually do that without completely redesigning the car, you need to make sure you get that waiver in, as well as a really good defense for why you deserve that waiver, because otherwise we might not let you race. So slide please. The execution of the race. At the very beginning, every team is going to show up and is required to come check in at a central table at the very front of the NASCAR pit garages. It's at this point that we send you, if your team is ready, to any of our available stations. So we ask what you're ready for. And then as soon as 8 o'clock hits, we hit the ground running. Cars are going everywhere. Teams are taking their cars. Teams are working on other problems that might have incurred during other developments and other scrutineering tests. But it's very important that in that first day especially, you go to as many scrutineering stations as you can. Because if you do not have all of the feedback that you need as early as possible, you might run into problems that are too severe for you to finish in one day or a day and a half. So even if you know that you might not pass, like say, for example, oh, we're missing a tail light, or oh, we don't quite have our batteries the way we want them yet. Still go to those stations that look at those things so that you can have everything except for that one little thing done so that you know, okay, this is the only thing electrically that I have to work on. This is the only thing braking-wise that I have to work on. And so then you can hit the ground running with all of that feedback, because you can always take the car back to the hotel parking lot or wherever your shop is after that first day of scrutineering and keep working if you really need to. So that's your time, that's your chance. So make sure that you know whether or not you need that. Slide, please. So teachers and sponsors, this time is probably a weird mix of relaxing and agonizing, because you're not allowed to actually be a part of the scrutineering process. This is the time for the students to show that they have built their car, that they know what their car is made of, what it consists of, and how it works. So sponsors are actually prohibited from being anywhere near the scrutineering station. So students, make sure that you come prepared. Make sure that you know your calculations, you know your stuff. And the other thing that I want to mention is walk, don't run. And I mean this both literally and figuratively, because we're not allowed to really run there. But we want you to not be as stressed out as possible working on these things. This is a really big challenge, yes. We want everyone to succeed, yes. But the adage, slow is smooth, smooth is fast, will really help you guys out. Because otherwise you might get too panicked and too stressed out, and then you might be inclined to overlook small mistakes, and those could add up and cost you your ability to race. Slide, please. So going into each station, depending on the year, there are 7 to 8 total stations, depending on your division and the type of race that you're actually running. So station 1 is always going to be mechanical, and this is your general station. This is where we look at the overall structure of the car, as well as the driver's ability to see out of it. The visibility rules that William talked about just before me, that's where we're going to test for that. Generally, stations 1 and 2 are the biggest hurdles of every car. You're going to find that there are so many things that you have to get checked off there, and so many different ways that you might have an issue. Expect not being able to pass it your first time. And don't be defeated by that. Everyone has to go back and redo something on their car, whether it's rule changes or a part breaks or things just didn't hold up over time. Even if you had a perfect car last year, we have yet to actually have a car make it completely through scrutineering without having to go back and change 1 or 2 things. Again, even if that was a returning car. So expect to have to make those changes. Slide, please. So electrical is the next biggest hurdle. We look at everything, obviously, concerning your electrical systems. So make sure that you understand your wiring diagram that you sent in already. Bring an extra copy with you so that you can reference it, because it'll be the judge's first time seeing a lot of those things. So you want to make sure that they can interpret your wiring diagram. Also be up to date on all of your calculations, because as a lot of these judges are former teachers, they might want to quiz you guys. So make sure that you are ready for that. Slide. So station 3, Tilton Turn, is all pretty basic. It's making sure that your car is capable of sustaining some dynamic changes. So we jack the car up to a few degrees, make sure that everything is still safe and sound. And we also want to see that the car can actually perform a full 180-degree turn within 15 meters, which is roughly the size of a 2-lane road. This is really important for the cross-country races, but it's still very important for the track races as well. Slide, please. So a slalom test, for those of you that have returned, you probably remember hearing Guntis yelling, "Fire, fire, fire," and then someone getting out and running out of their car. The slalom test, station 4, is where we test every single driver's ability to both handle the car and get out of it safely. So if you have a fire inside your vehicle, you need to be able to get out of it safely, right? So we want to test and make sure that every driver is capable of doing that within 15 seconds. So at this point, make sure that every one of your drivers is at this station and has their driver's license and is generally ready to go for the slalom as well as anything else that your team will really need. Slide, please. So Station 5, braking, fairly straightforward. We do a component inspection to make sure that your car is going to be capable of withstanding stops, and then we also have your car get up to speed, which we always measure with a radar gun, and then have you perform a braking, like full brake stop. And I feel like the importance of this station generally speaks for itself. So make sure that your brakes are already bled and that any other component is properly secured to the car. Slide, please. Station 6 is the endurance test. This is sort of a track operations test. We have the car perform a full speed lap, which will actually determine your starting order for the race. But we also want to see a full breakdown procedure, essentially, because if your car has an issue out on the track, you have to go get it, and you can't just push it all the way back in. You definitely don't want to do that. It's way too hot out for that, trust me. So you have to make sure that you are familiar with loading your car on and off of the trailer. And we practice that and demonstrate that and make sure that you are aware of the possible dangers and things inherently associated with your car so that you don't damage your own vehicle as you load it back up to maybe perform and fix something else that already happened to it. Slide, please. So the cross-country race, we have another station for that. Generally, that's just putting together the entire convoy. If you're racing in this race, you don't have to worry about that. We won't have that station here. Slide, please. And the last station is for the electric solar vehicle division. That one is, again, only for that division. We go through the specific rules that pertain to that vehicle, as well as the charging station and your battery swapping procedures. Because those battery packs are so heavy, we want to make sure that everyone that's involved with those battery swaps is doing it in a safe manner that doesn't endanger anyone, the car, the batteries, etc. So we want to make sure that you have that full procedure already done and thought about, as opposed to just trying to muscle it in and just force it every time. Slide, please. So additional guidance. Rules, rules, rules. Make sure that you are reading those. Make sure that you have that scrutineering document alongside those rules. Make sure that you know them forward and backward. That's going to work wonders for you. If you have any problems beyond that, do not be afraid to ask those other teams, because they've all been exactly where you are. One of the things that I enjoy the most about this race is that oftentimes, if you have a really high-performing team, they will oftentimes get through scrutineering, fix their one or two issues, and then you just notice their color shirt just scatter throughout the garage. And that's when they're providing help and assistance to those other teams that might be struggling a little bit more. That's the kind of team that you all should want to aspire to be. The one that completely conquers scrutineering and then helps everyone else do the same thing, because it's a challenge that you're all going through together. If you want any further resources, there's a PDF that's called Navigating Scrutineering on the website, and a lot of this presentation was based on that. There's a few more tips and tricks in there. Look for that. But otherwise, this concludes my presentation. Are there any questions? Shoot. So generally, knowing how far you've progressed on your car, you'll know you'll know generally the state that it's in. So if you feel like, if you don't have all your wheels on when you show up, you know that you're going to have a lot of work to do, kind of thing. So it's, you generally, by spending time with the car, you know whether or not you're ready. But still expect, even if you've got a fully ready car, still expect to be rocked a little bit.